An arrest, and I love you, and a Kids in America duet. Welcome to Riverdale, my friends, and this episode of What Happened. What's up, you lovely people? Lisa here, and welcome back to another Riverdale recap all about episode 11. Now, I'm sorry I'm a little later than usual getting this up, but I have a good excuse, I promise. Thursday night, I was at the Paley Center where the Riverdale cast was having a panel and a screening, and I actually got to interview most of the cast, and let me just tell you, they're pretty awesome, as you would imagine, and I will try to get those interviews up as soon as possible, so maybe you should subscribe so you'll get a notification of when those go live. But now I'm digressing, so let's just get this party started. So this episode takes place around the Riverdale Homecoming Dance, which is also Alumni Weekend. We see Archie and his mom, Mary, played by the awesome Molly Ringwald, talking, and Archie's like, "You came home because of the divorce and because I called Dad, right?" And Mary then tells Archie that she actually thought Riverdale would be better and safe for him than Chicago, and that's why she left him there. And it's like, oh, Mary, if only you knew. Archie then tells his mom that he's going to be playing some songs at the dance and that she should come. We then move on to the Lodge residence where Hermione gets off the phone with Hiram's lawyer, and it looks like her and Veronica's statements have actually helped him, and the judge is willing to give Hiram a break, and he might be getting out of jail in only a few months. Now this has Veronica a little worried though, and she once again brings up, what if he had something to do with Jason Blossom? And Hermione's basically like, girl, shut your mouth. You have to support your father. Stop demonizing him with something there's no proof of. Well, proof of yet that we know of, right, Hermione? Because see, there's a lot of proof against him for other things. Jughead then brings his dad some coffee and donuts, and when he arrives at the trailer, he sees that it's clean, and FP is shaved, and it's like, oh shit, the apocalypse must be happening because what's happened to his dad because his dad shaved. FP then tells Jughead that he read his manuscript that he's been writing about Jason Blossom, and it's good, but then he starts asking a lot of questions, like, why did you pick Jason Blossom as a subject, and other things. Jughead says because it's not even just a story about who done it, but whether Riverdale is a place of darkness or evil. FP then says that maybe Jughead should start to kind of move on from this story because he shouldn't let it be the only story he tells or the most important. And it's like, okay, FP, are you starting to shake in your boots a little? Is there something you're not telling us? Are you scared of what Jughead might uncover? What are you guilty of exactly? Because you're kind of acting like you're guilty of something. In the hallway at school, Archie's being all needy and trying to get Veronica to talk about what happened between them at the party, but Veronica is definitely preoccupied. She basically tells him to slow his roll, that they had a beautiful and fleeting moment, but that's all it was. But of course, Archie thinks it was something else, but Veronica says, you might be boyfriend worthy, and Archie's all over here, like, jumping up and down, like, yes, pick me, be your boyfriend, and it's like, damn, man, you got over Val pretty fast. Thankfully, Veronica is smarter than that right now, and she says, quote, she doesn't have the bandwidth to explore that right now. Archie then says he told his mom that he was going to perform at the dance, so maybe they can do that duet that they promised together. Veronica shoots him down and also ends up telling him that for now, they just kind of have to pretend that their moment didn't happen. It's like, sorry Archie, not this time. We then see Veronica go talk to Betty and Alice, and Alice is definitely on a mission. She says that anyone not currently in this room is a murder suspect, and of course there's only 3 people in that room. It's like, I don't know, Alice. I don't know if you're kind of off everybody's lists yet. Everyone is still a suspect in this damn town. Veronica is still expressing her thoughts that maybe Hiram hired FP to kill Jason, and Alice thinks that maybe Joaquin was an accomplice, so she wants to question all of them and get to the bottom of this, and she wants Betty to help. Now, Betty is being loyal to Jughead and thinks all of this is just kind of crazy talk and refuses to help Alice and ended up walking out, but there's this look on Veronica's face that's kind of like, okay, maybe I should work with Alice. Maybe we're on the same side here. Meanwhile, at creepy Thornhill, Polly is continuing her mission of proving the Blossoms had something to do with Jason's murder. She looks into Mr. and Mrs. Blossom's bedroom and sees a ton of red wigs, and then Mr. Blossom getting ready in the mirror, and he doesn't have red hair, he has gray hair. He sees her in the mirror though and turns around, and Polly is like, oh crap, and quickly backs back into the hallway and slams the door behind her. So it seems like Mr. Blossom has been lying about his hair color, and that means this man could be lying about everything, right? Also, that was a lot of wigs. Veronica then goes back to see Alice Cooper and tells her that she doesn't have the same kind of loyalty to the Joneses family like Betty does, and she wants to help find out the truth about FP and her dad, so she's willing to help Alice in her quest. Uh-oh, Veronica, this is totally gonna bite you in the ass later. Like, what about your loyalty to Betty? Aren't you two friends? I guess family comes first though. At lunch we learn from Cheryl that she's going to bring Polly to the homecoming dance as her date, and they're going to campaign as co-queen for the homecoming court together because it should have been Polly and Jason up there anyway. And part of me is just thinking Cheryl's doing all this just to make Betty jealous. And I also just love the fact that in this scene she calls Betty a nightmare smurfette, and it's like, I just love Cheryl's one-liners. Between her and Kevin, so many great one-liners. And after Cheryl leaves, Archie asks Betty if he can play some songs for the dance because he already told his mom that he'd be playing the dance, and kind of like talk about wishing something into fruition here. Betty and Jughead are basically like, really man? This dance is supposed to be fun, your songs are just way too damn depressing for that. Well, Veronica pops in to save the day saying she's gonna sing with Archie and they'll do some upbeat covers, and Archie just looks confused because she already shot him down, so what is your angle there, Veronica? Well, here's her angle. She pulls Archie into a classroom, and while he thinks it's kind of the hookup, she's got other plans. Veronica is basically enlisting Archie to help her. She wants Archie to help her break into FP's trailer, and Archie's very reluctant and says, you know, maybe we should just talk to Jughead. This doesn't sound like a good idea. We then go see Mary, who shows up at Fred's office to surprise him, but instead of him, she finds Hermione sitting at her desk, and we learn that Hermione was kind of the mean girl to Mary back in school. And I really want some flashbacks to what the parents were like in high school. I feel like they would be just as interesting as the kids that we see now. As the dance is getting near, Betty is busy decorating for the homecoming when she talks to Polly on the phone, and Polly reveals that she's only going to the dance with Cheryl to keep kind of Cheryl distracted so that she can keep snooping around Thornhill for clues. Betty then tells Polly, you know, remember the deal, if you don't find anything by homecoming, you're coming home to live with us. And Polly says she just needs to get into the Blossom's bedroom, but they protect it obsessively, so she's trying to figure out ways, and it's like, yeah, you can't have anyone stealing any of Mr. Blossom's like 40 million wigs, right? Someone then starts jiggling the door handles to Polly's room, so she gets off the phone, and it ends up being Mrs. Blossom with Polly's daily milkshake. I wish someone brought me a daily milkshake. Mrs. Blossom tells Polly that she must be famished from all the exploration she's been doing, and Polly's face is like, oh shit, she's gonna kill me, she knows what I've been doing. Now Mrs. Blossom then tells Polly that the East Wing is out of bounds. And this just kind of reminds me of Beauty and the Beast. It's like, don't go into that wing. So it's like, now we really know the Blossoms are hiding something in that bedroom. Also, that milkshake looked real good. But why is Mrs. Blossom forcing milkshakes down Polly's throat? Now Betty is still decorating for the dance when Jughead walks in and informs her that Alice basically tackled him in the hallway to invite him and FP to dinner before the dance. Betty looks a little surprised and then a little suspicious, and when Jughead is like, oh wait, did you kind of not know about this dinner? Betty lies, saying that she knew, when really she knows what's up with Alice. So she ends up going home to confront Alice, and she thinks that Alice is setting up a trap to question FP about everything since Betty wouldn't help. Betty then threatens to tell Jughead the truth about Alice's plan when Alice counters by saying, you might not want to do that because it seems like this meant a lot to Jughead when I asked him to dinner, and he's so excited to have our families get to know each other, and that's all I'm after. Well played, Alice. Well played. Betty then tells Alice that FP is innocent and she trusts Jughead. Back at the Andrews house though, their biggest dilemma is, well, choosing pizza or Chinese for dinner, which is usually my biggest dilemma too. We learn that Mary and Fred are going to the dance together, but there's a twist. Mary also invited Hermione to go with them, and that's totally not going to be awkward. After dinner, Juggy and Archiekins are in bed having their boy talk when Jughead brings up that he thinks he might go back and live with his dad because he thinks his dad has changed since he's shaved and cleaned and he showed up to work every day and he stopped drinking. What's actually made FP clean up his act all of a sudden? Well, Archie tells Jughead to maybe wait and see if all of this sticks this time, and Jughead's like, no, something truly has changed. And then he brings up how FP was so interested in his manuscript he's writing about Jason Blossom, and Archie is thinking, oh really? Crap. Why would FP be so interested in what Jughead knows about the murder? And then Archie makes up some bullshit excuse about how his mom needs almond milk in like the middle of the night, and he has to go to the store to get it, but Jughead's obviously smarter than that and thinks Archie's running off to have a midnight rendezvous with Veronica. And well, that's close. Jughead, kinda close. Archie does end up running all the way to Veronica's, but it's really just to tell her that he's changed his mind and he's totally in with her plan and he wants to help her. He says that Jughead's been hurt by FP too many times and he needs to know the truth too, and both agree that Jughead and Betty can never find out, but we all know that they will because secrets do not last in this town, it seems. It's now the day of the dance and Cheryl's helping Polly get ready, and of course there's great opportunity there for the CoverGirl product placement. Polly suggests that since the theme of the dance is blast from the past, that maybe they should borrow some of Mrs. Blossom's vintage bling for the night. And of course, Cheryl thinks that's a great idea, so they go snooping in Mrs. Blossom's bedroom. Now, as Cheryl's looking through Mrs. Blossom's jewelry, Polly's snooping around, opening various drawers, and we finally get an explanation of why Mr. Blossom has so many wigs. Cheryl says that the legend has it that Clifford's hair turned white overnight because he saw the ghost of Grandpappy Blossom with his throat slit. That's totally a pleasant dream. We then see Cheryl come across a ring that looks very familiar. It's Nana's ring. You know, the one that Nana said that Mrs. Blossom might cut someone's finger off if she knew that she had it. The two kind of both lunge for it at the same time, and Polly's like, how on earth does Mrs. Blossom have it when it's the ring that Jason used to propose to me with? Polly says the only way that they could have gotten that ring is from Jason himself and basically over his dead body because Jason wouldn't have given that ring up. Cheryl then tells Polly to kind of back off, grabs her wrist, gets real mean and says, if you thought these babies guaranteed your safety, you're sadly mistaken. And Cheryl is bringing the claws out. Now it's time for another installment of Awkward Riverdale Dinners, as FP and Jughead are at the Coopers for dinner. Alice, of course, lays into FP, asking all kinds of questions like, where did you make your money? Were you upset when Hiram bought the drive-in land? And FP's kind of saved by the bell on this question as the doorbell rings and in walks Hal, who Betty has invited for dinner, which Alice Cooper's not too happy about. And right now it's like, well played, Betty. Well played. That's one way to get your mom to back off. Mrs. Blossom is now back in Polly's room and she knows that Cheryl and Polly have been looking through her jewelry, so she's explaining to Polly how she got Nana's ring. She says that the last time Clifford saw Jason was the day he basically washed his hands of the family, saying he wanted nothing more to do with them or the family name or lineage, and he threw the ring in Clifford's face, and Clifford gave it to Mrs. Blossom for safekeeping. Now, Polly tells Mrs. Blossom she thought it had been lost when Mrs. Blossom is like, everything ends up coming back. What exactly do you mean by that, shady lady? Mrs. Blossom then forced Polly to drink her daily milkshake again, and at this point I'm like, there's gotta be something going on with these milkshakes. Like, what on earth is in these? Why is she making Polly drink the milkshakes? You'd think that since Mrs. Blossom is so into these babies that she'd be feeding Polly like healthy juices and crap instead of all the sugar. Back at the awkward dinner, it's FP's turn to take a stab at Alice, so he brings up their own homecoming and how he overheard Alice and Hal fighting at theirs over something, and he quickly censors himself, saying he doesn't know what it was, but it sounded like it was a life or death situation. I'm guessing that this could have been when Alice told Hal that she was pregnant that very first time, right? That led to the possible abortion that was alluded to when they got into a fight a couple episodes ago. Well, FP tells Alice he doesn't care what she thinks of him, but don't jerk him around, especially in front of Jughead. I want to know what history these two really have with each other. Next we see Polly is totally knocked out. Yeah, that's right. Mrs. Blossom spiked her damn milkshake, but she assures Cheryl that what she gave her won't hurt the babies. Now Cheryl asks Mrs. Blossom if the story about the ring is true, and of course Mrs. Blossom says every word of it, but I'm not believing that. I don't believe anything that comes out of any Blossom's mouth except maybe Jason, if he were actually alive. Mrs. Blossom then brings up how the ring is now missing. Cheryl says it's Polly's fault and that Polly lunged for the ring, so Cheryl flushed it down the drain or toilet to get rid of the evidence in case anyone ever asked and there'd be no proof and it'd be just their word against Polly's. And Mrs. Blossom was like, yeah, this is actually good thinking, dear. I thought she was really attached to that ring, though. Meanwhile, as Cheryl's telling the story, we see shots of her holding the ring over the toilet, but we actually never see her flushing it, so I'm kind of already calling BS on the story. Archie and Veronica are now snooping around FP's trailer, which they've managed to get into because there is a key hidden under the garden gnome. They haven't found anything after searching high and low, but Veronica is like getting paranoid, freaked out. She is so convinced that there's something there. She says maybe we should just keep looking around and and she just has to know one way or another about her dad. Archie then calms her down and the two end up kissing, and then they end up getting a text from Mrs. Cooper saying the dinner's over and they book it out of there. FP drops Betty and Jughead off at the dance, and we learn that FP wants to get the Jones family back together, and that includes Jellybean and Jughead's mom. He tells Jughead that he's found work in Toledo where he wants to move the entire family. He's just ready to get out of Riverdale, and why is that, FP? And while he's telling Jughead all of this, we see Jughead just kind of look out the car window and stare at Betty because he's like, well, if we move to Toledo, what about my love, Betty? The dance is now starting, and coming through those doors is Fred hand in hand with Mary and Hermione. Yeah, not awkward at all. Just a nice little threesome there. Jughead tells Betty he wants to talk to her after the dance, which is obviously going to be about the Toledo situation, but Betty gets distracted when she sees Cheryl, so she goes up to Cheryl and asks where Polly is. Cheryl tells Betty that Polly sugar crashed last minute, leaving her high and dry, and she's no longer going to do anything nice for anyone again. I really don't know if you've done many nice things at all, Cheryl. Alice runs into Mary in the bathroom, and Alice brings up Fred and Hermione and basically is trying to get under Mary's skin, which Mary says she's been doing since junior high. And Mary tells her, you know what, Fred's a big boy and he can do whatever he wants. Once again, looks like these two have some very interesting history, and I'd love to see a whole flashback episode just based on the parents in high school. Anyway, Alice ends up getting a phone call, runs out of the bathroom. Betty then goes and asks Kevin if he's seen Jughead, and Betty then sees Alice in the corner talking to Veronica and Archie, and all these red flags are going off as she starts to make her way towards them though. The principal and the mayor intercept her and start asking her all kinds of things about, the dance and whatever, and you kind of hear the mayor say something about an intern position, but Betty is just zoned out, focusing all her energy on the corner of the room where Alice and Veronica are talking. Veronica kind of ends up spotting her, and Archie's gone off to talk with Jughead, and now Betty's getting paranoid about what's going on, and then the mayor asks Betty if she'll walk her up to the stage for the introduction, and Betty's basically like, nah girl, you got legs, go walk yourself, I got some skulls to go crack over in this corner. Betty ends up confronting Archie and Veronica, asking where they have been, and the fastest excuse that Archie can pull out of his ass is that they stopped at Pop's. And when Betty asks what they were talking to Alice about, Archie's like, sorry girl, I gotta go get my Troy Bolton on, Veronica's my Gabriella, we gotta go do this. And then they run off to the stage where they begin singing Kids in America. No, not Kids of the Future by the Jonas Brothers, the original song, Kids in America. Now the clip of this performance was actually released earlier this week, but as it was released, it was just the entire musical performance. But when it aired on the show, there's other scenes cut into it. But if you watched that clip earlier in the week, you saw Betty giving some very disgusted, kind of disapproving looks at Archie and Veronica as they sing on stage. And they totally released this clip early to make you think out of context. Because if you watched this out of context, you'd assume that Betty is jealous that Archie and Veronica might have something going on, but that's not actually the case. We now know that all those bitchy looks coming from Betty are because she's pissed that Veronica and Archie are doing something with her mom and have been sneaking around. And I'm just totally honestly living for all Betty's disgusted looks during this whole performance. There better be a gif of every one of them. As Archie and Veronica flirt and sing their little hearts out, one person at the dance is not having fun. Can you guess who? Yep, it's poor little Cheryl. She ends up storming out of the dance, and meanwhile, Sheriff Keller and his squad show up at FP's trailer with a warrant to search the place, and FP's like, go ahead, I have nothing to hide. As they search, they end up finding a lockbox in the back of the closet, and inside is a gun. Kind of a familiar looking gun. You know this gun, right? Yep. It seems like it could be the one that Betty found in Mrs. Grundy's car, then stashed in her drawer that Alice Cooper ended up finding. It's gotta be the same gun, right? But if it is, how on earth did it get in FP's closet? Well, upon closer inspection, it looks like maybe the gun that's in FP's trailer could be different, maybe? I don't know, maybe it's just the angle, but kind of seems like it might have a little bit of a longer barrel than the one Betty found. Plus, the one Betty found had an all-black handle, and this one seems to have a little bit of brown in the handle, like some wood in the handle. Now, I know it's dark when we see the gun in the lockbox, but I swear it's got that brown there, right? But are these two actually supposed to be the same gun? Part of me feels like it actually is, but either way, FP definitely looks surprised to see that there's a gun there. Back at the dance, Mary and Fred are slow dancing, and Mary asks Fred if Archie and Veronica are a thing, and Fred seems to think so, and then as that's happening, we pan away to see poor Hermione just sitting at a table all by herself staring at them dancing. Someone just needs to give Hermione some love. We then go to Kevin and Joaquin dancing, and Kevin's yammering about how Joaquin is his first boyfriend when Jughead asks if he's seen Betty, and then Kevin delivers just another one of his awesome zingers saying, I think you all need tracking devices. It's like, oh, what would I do without Kevin? He's seriously one of my favorites on the show. I actually want to know more about him, and thankfully, we're going to get that in season 2. Kevin then sees his dad, Sheriff Keller, walk into the dance, and Sheriff Keller starts talking to the mayor, and Kevin knows something is about to go down, so he goes to find out what it is, while Joaquin's like, uh-oh, I got to get out of there, and he walks the opposite way. Veronica, Archie, and Betty are now in the hallway, hashing it out, and Veronica's telling Betty to let her explain. But Betty is definitely hurt that these two have been working with her mom behind her back. Veronica then says again that she just needed to know the truth about Hiram, and Archie says he was just looking out for Jughead. Veronica's like, you know what, I'll take all the blame for this when Jughead walks into the hallway. Archie ends up telling Jughead everything, and Betty says that Alice put them up to it, but they didn't find anything in FP's trailer. But Jughead just doesn't seem to care. The damage has already been done. They all went behind his back, and he asks how they knew when his dad wouldn't be at the trailer, and obviously it's because of that dinner, and he immediately thinks that Betty knew all along and planned the dinner on purpose. Now Betty insists she didn't know exactly what they were doing, but Jughead doesn't care, and he delivers a blow saying, I was going to pass on going to Toledo for you. He then tells Betty, you could have told me or warned me, and Betty's like, I didn't want to because you were so excited about our families getting together for dinner and how, she didn't want to disappoint him. Then Kevin and the parents rush out into the hallway and inform them that FP was just arrested for the murder of Jason Blossom, and Jughead is now devastated, runs out of the school, runs all the way to his dad's trailer, breaks down on the floor, and as he's crying or breaking down on the floor, he's having some flashbacks of when his dad said that he may not be perfect, but he's no killer. And then Jughead kind of sits up and gets this look on his face and then runs out of the trailer. What could that mean? Betty and Alice are now back at home, and Betty is confronting Alice, asking her if she tipped off the police because Kevin said someone gave the sheriff a tip. Alice says it wasn't her, but she's glad that Betty's done with that Jones family, and Betty responds with something that will make all Bughead shippers' heads explode. She says, I'm in love with Jughead, the big L word. And Betty tells Alice that he's just as much her family as she is, and when Alice tries to stop her from going to look for Jughead, Dark Betty kind of snaps into place, and Betty stands up to Alice, and it's like, you go girl, someone's got to put Alice in her place, and Alice just moves out of the way and lets Betty go. Now that FP has been arrested, everyone's kind of back home talking about the current situations. Veronica and Hermione are trying to figure out what to do if FP ends up confessing because it could possibly drag them into all this drama. They say that if Hiram did have something to do with the murder, they're going to cut all ties with him and he'll be dead to them. But Veronica's like, not so fast. We might not be able to walk away so easily, and I'm thinking the same thing since we do know Hiram is coming to town soon. Archie and Mary are back home talking, and Archie's talking about how he thought FP had changed, and Mary's like, okay, so maybe Riverdale isn't so safe anymore, and you should come live with me in Chicago. Poor Fred is like overhearing all of this from the stairwell, and Mary tells Archie to promise her that he'll think about it, and all I'm thinking is, poor Fred. At Thornhill, gotta love Cheryl, man. She's checking up on Polly. She holds a mirror up to Polly's nose to make sure that she's breathing, and then she ends up tucking her in, and then we see her walk by her parents' room, and as she looks in, her mom's crying, saying FP has to answer for what he did to Jason, and we see Cheryl look down at her hand, and what's in it? It's Nana's ring, so yeah, Cheryl didn't flush it, but what's she gonna do with the ring? We end the episode with Betty going to Pops looking for Jughead. Pops says that she's not the only one looking for him, and we see that Veronica and Archie are in their own booth and they get up. Well, it kind of looks like those two weren't looking too hard because they're sitting there eating a full meal. Betty says she's not talking to either of them anymore when Veronica drops a bomb saying Kevin called to tell them about the gun in the lockbox, but Archie and Veronica insist they turned that place upside down, including the closet, and never saw the lockbox, so someone must have put it there after they left, and they're framing FP. And then, of course, the episode is over. Damn! Okay, so who on earth could be framing FP? Someone had to be spying on the trailer, and they knew when Archie and Veronica were done, so they snuck in. But who? And if it is supposed to be that same gun that Betty found in Grundy's car that Alice ended up finding, could it have been Alice? I kind of doubt that, but maybe it was Hal. He obviously could have found the gun because, well, he lived in that house. And Hal did steal Sheriff Keller's evidence board, and we still have no idea why at this point in time. He also, at the dinner, asked FP how that trailer park was because he was thinking of maybe moving there. And also all the other parents were at the dance at that time, so that's who I kind of think could have planted this gun there. Also, what do you think Cheryl's going to do with Nana's ring, and will Polly be able to actually do something about the Blossoms? What revelation did Jughead have at the end of the episode, and where did he run off to? There's still so many questions, but thankfully, we're going to get some answers. We're going to find out who Jason's killer is in the next episode, as we only have 2 episodes left. So let's roll the promo for the next one.
He's innocent.
He's being framed.
If it wasn't my dad, who killed Jason Blossom?
You think I killed my son?
If you stay on this path, you will end up dead.
Okay, that looks pretty intense, and it's like, what the fuck? Someone filmed Jason's murder? Like, that's what they are all watching at the end, right? When you hear the gunshot? Like, the show might just be getting even more twisted and morbid. So now I gotta know, who do you think killed Jason Blossom? Any more clues? Also, we do know that someone dies in the finale too, so who could that be? I've heard some people guess that maybe it's Hal, some say Joaquin or FP. I think all those are solid choices because they definitely affect some of the main characters in one way or another. Well, maybe not Joaquin as much as anybody else, but the other 2 definitely. So now it's your turn to leave me all your new thoughts and comments about this episode down below or on my social media. Any new theories about who killed Jason Blossom? Also, who do you think is going to die? And are Josie and the Pussycats on tour or something? Because why weren't they performing at the dance? Anyways, leave me all your theories in 3, 2, 1. And then for more, be sure to click right over here. I'm going to try to get those Riverdale interviews edited as fast as I can. They're going to be up soon, so you want to subscribe so that you'll know when they're live. And high fives to all you for already subscribing. As always, I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me, talking Riverdale. I'll see you real soon.